In chess, checks are really important, and if you want to be a good tactical player, well, you'll need to find those checks. Now, we all know it's not that easy, right? You'll be playing the game, there's time pressure, you have stress of winning the game, and you'll miss the winning check. After the game, the computer tells you you're an idiot, you'll feel bad, everybody feels bad, nobody wins. So, after this video, I promise you that if you follow my method, you will be more consistent and also faster at finding checks, and you will be winning more games. So in the first part of the video, I'll show you my method of finding those checks in comparison to the method I used before, which I think is way less fast and way less consistent. And then in the second part, we'll solve a few puzzles using this method. So let's get into it, and we're going to look at a puzzle here, and we're going to look for checks. So if you know Gotham Chess, a big chess YouTuber, he always says look for checks, captures, and attacks. So well, checks is what this video is about, so we're going to look for checks. Now what I would do before is I take my piece and I would look at the lines it could move and see whether from that square it could check the king. So, well, the queen can't check the king, and then the bishop can't check the king, the rook can't check the king. So this takes a lot of time, this is really not efficient. You're looking at your pieces, you're first moving them and then seeing whether you can check the king. That is not good. Looking at your own pieces is really not what you should be doing. You should find your goal, your target, and that is the other guy's king. So if you can find the king, which you should be able to do, you should look at all the lines where you can actually give the king a check. So these squares are where you can give the king a check from. You're not going to check him from this square because the queen is in the way. So what you're going to do is you're going to draw all the lines from the king until you hit a piece or you hit the edge of the board. And as you can see, these squares, all of these squares, are points where you can actually check the king from. But the problem is you also need pieces to check the king. So if you look at my pieces here, well, I can't go to any of those lines except with the rook here. But the rook is not able to check the king here. So I don't have checks with my pieces, except we're forgetting one thing. And that is that there's not only diagonal and straight movement on the board, but also L movements. And those are the knights. So if we look at the king, where can the king get checked from by knights? Well, all these squares. And how do you find these squares really fast? Well, you should look at the knight. I got a small video on this as an octopus. A lot of chess coaches tell this. And you need to visualize those squares. So if you learn to visualize those squares, you can do the same for the king. You get the king in the center here on the white square, and you know all the green squares or black squares are going to be squares where you can get checked by a knight. And look at our knight here. Our knight there is just going to check the king. So you actually have two checks. So by doing this and then getting all the squares where you can get checked from by the knight, you actually have all the squares where you can get checked from. And we can see that our only check is going to be with the knight. Now you get two checks. You get that square and that square. Well, this square is going to be taken by the bishop, but this square actually checks the king, and it also removes this square from the king. So what you get is you get checkmate and you win. Now for this next puzzle, we're going to do exactly the same thing. So you take the king and you start drawing arrows until you hit a piece or you hit the wall. And you can see these are all the squares where the king can get hit from. Now, you also get these knight squares, right? But there's no knight on the board anymore, so it doesn't make sense to draw these. Now, you take your pieces and you search for check squares. So you get the queen. Queen can hit here for a check, here for a check, here for a check. And then you take the rook, but for the rook you only need the straight arrows, not the diagonal arrows, because the rook just doesn't move diagonal. So you get this check, and these are all the checks that you have on the board. So which one is best? Well, let's have a look. If I do the rook one, then he'll just take, so we don't want that, so it's the queen one. And now we do just the same thing. We start drawing arrows. All of these squares can be a check, and we look for checks. And you can see that this one is a check. Here you have 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 a check. So which one is best? Well, probably this one, and that is a mate. Well, you might be thinking this is not a really fast process because you're drawing all these arrows every time, and yes, this is not a fast process, but you should visualize those arrows. You shouldn't be drawing them all the time. If you want to be really consistent, you can draw them and then draw all the arrows, but no, like in this case, you should realize that this is a back rank mate, and you should just back rank him. I mean, you should also practice a bit of common sense. So what I want you to understand is that this is a fast way, a fast image of where you can check the opponent, and you should be looking at the other guy's king and not at your own pieces. So in this case, the fast visualization should be all these squares and then the knight squares, of course. And you'll see that there's actually no piece of you that can check their king. So you won't be looking at a king. You will be looking at, hey, what is happening here? Oh, he's jumping with his knight in front of my queen. So maybe I'll just take the knight. So yeah, this is really, it's really about the process of visualizing all the checks that there can be. But you should be working on not only drawing the arrows, but also just getting a mental image. And I feel like if you do this, you won't be missing checks anymore. If I look at my queen here, I might look at this check, but I might not look at this check, not look at this check. And if you do it the other way around and you actually visualize those arrows, well, you'll see all these checks. You won't be missing these checks. See, the queen can actually check on quite a lot of places. So I hope this helps you. I hope you get better at checking, and check out my other videos and subscribe.